For the past month, Yah has had me to deal with the importance of living in a biblical reality and not being aligned according to the mental programming that Satan has worked so diligently to create. The last lesson with how to deal with the new reality once you realize that over time your thoughts you may have had were not your own, that was a very important understanding to have. And if we're looking at what's going on in this world, we can see that it's important to own our own thoughts. For instance, when the war in Israel first started, I made a video about it and explained how I'm not giving my mind over to it, and there were so many people controlled by the media telling me I should be caring about the babies being killed and all that other stuff. They were emotionally charged and angry at me, even though they never actually saw this happen. They were just being moved by the media because that is what the media was charged to do. They wanted me to care about the babies being killed, and I honestly did not know what they were talking about until after I turned on the news coverage and heard the mainstream pumping those thoughts about it.
Meanwhile, documents found on the bodies of Hamas terrorists show the group intentionally targeted elementary schools and a youth center in its attack on Israel.
The media repeated this to those watching in order to emotionally grab them in. And even though, ironically, at that same time I was making content explaining the manipulation and the mind control that comes from this television set, people still were not able to connect the dots and able to separate from the mental manipulation. They did not own their own thoughts. They were attached to the thoughts the mainstream wanted them to have. And that is completely the wrong way to live during this hour that we're in. The truth is that those that worship and follow the enemy want to emotionally grab us into their agenda. They try to keep us emotionally attached, while at the same time, they also keep us unaware of the full magnitude of where these agendas are leading us. That is because this is all a mental war being used to bring the world into the Great Reset. And it is your choice if you decide to give your mind over to it or not. Of course, as a believer, I care about babies being killed and other people being killed. I care about all of it, but I will not give my mind over to their agendas. The thing is that once you realize that many of your thoughts are not your own, but it's that you have been conditioned and manipulated to view many things in the way our enemy has designed us to think, it is now your job to wake up and make sure this no longer happens. Living in the truth is a difficult task, because while we are not to follow their agendas, we also cannot live ignorantly and blind to them either. We are not asleep, and so it is important that we recognize what is happening for multiple reasons. The number one reason is that we always want to be ready for Yah and ready to follow him when and how he decides to move us. This is a season where faith and trust is completely required, and we must be awake and be diligent in our walk to stay ready and prepared to endure to the end. Those who will endure are those who are awake and have decided to live by faith and not by sight. And so it is important to be awake and aware. And so if we're going to be awake and aware, right now there is something that we all must be very alert to and mindful of. This week, I want it to be clear to all that war is upon us. And at any moment, this world could drastically spiral into chaos. And you must be ready for this. I do want to continue discussing the history of our mind control because that topic is important, because minds are truly being awakened. But it is important that those of us who live in Messiah and will answer his call to endure to the end, it is important that we live in this important reality that war and change is upon us. And it is important that you live with this expectation so that when things change, you are not caught off guard or blindsided as the rest of the world will be. The masses are clearly asleep, and the saddest thing is that they see these agendas, they see war brewing, but they live in some sort of blind optimism that makes them feel as if things will get sorted out and problems will not come to affect them. This is definitely the mindset of those living in Babylon today who believe that no problems will ever come to them. But they are just living in the strong delusion. You must not. It is important that those of us preparing for Yah's kingdom do not live in that same ignorance, caught in the strong delusion. Please know that war and change is upon us, and today we're going to discuss it so that none of you are asleep to what is happening. Let's begin. Now, I want to make something clear. I said this in the last video, and I want to make sure it's clear. It's important that you understand the difference between the truth and narratives. Much of what we hear on the news is very far from the truth. It's important that you do not look at what is being reported or said in the mainstream as being the truth, because this is how you can be drawn in emotionally to these agendas. I do not believe that what is going on has anything to do with the truth. Much of it is all a narrative, a storyline used to herd people to the destination that this world is leading everyone. It's a storyline, and depending on where you are in the world, your narrative may be different because the main narrative is about division, so later the beast can bring the world together. For instance, the narrative that we hear in the West here is very much different probably than what you hear in Russia or China. It depends on where you are. The world is completely separated so that the beast can bring us together. I say this to explain that just because I am reporting the news does not mean that I believe the news. Like if I mention nuclear bombs, it does not mean that I believe in this weapon or technology. It does not matter whether it's real or if it's not real. It's the narrative that they are using, and it's important to understand how that narrative and storyline will be used against us. Another example, during the pandemic, I did not and still do not believe in the story that they gave us. I still believe it was something else that I'm not allowed to say or mention. But even though I did not believe in it, I still monitor the news and the narratives, so I was prepared to deal with what they were trying to do. Whether it was true or not did not matter, because the narrative of it is what they use in order for them to steer us. So I had to understand the narrative and story so I could prepare myself and my family to how they were using it. So when the time came that they were ready to hurt us, I was ready to resist, and we were prepared for the isolation that came from the world because of it. We were ready because we understood the narrative. So please understand this. As we continue to review what's going on, I am just discussing the narratives. Now, eventually the narratives are going to lead into real change and consequences that will be real for the world. And that is what I want us all to be ready for. This is what I'm saying. I hope that makes sense. So the thing is that though, if you understand where we're going, then it's easy to understand why all these things are happening. That's why it's important to live in a biblical reality. If we live from a biblical reality, as we move into Yah's kingdom, we know that there's judgment that is coming to this world. It is documented in the book of Revelation. Start in chapter 6. From reading, we know from the time the second, the third, and the fourth seals are opened, there will be widespread death on this earth, and a quarter of the earth's population will be gone. It says, "So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Sheol followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth." As Revelation chapter 6, verse 8. It said a fourth of the earth was given over to him. So for me personally, I am waiting for all these seals to be opened. Now, I don't personally think, and I don't have the expectation that there will be some sort of notification, like we get notifications on our cell phones. There won't be anything that tells us that each seal has been opened. So my reality is tied to my expectation of what is prophesied to come. Second seal, conflict on earth. Third seal, scarcity on earth. And from those two seals, the fourth seal brings widespread death on the earth. So this is my reality that I live through and prepare for. And it's important that you understand that in the mainstream world, it will not ever sound like this. CNN is not going to report about the seals being opened and tie it to biblical prophecy. They will never do that. And even if they do, they're going to have people discredit it so that it never makes sense. All of these biblical prophecies are going to have mainstream storylines that lead those that are in the strong delusion and will lead them to the beast. Always remember, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they do not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this reason, Elohim will send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who do not believe the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. That's 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. So it's important to recognize that in the mainstream, instead of CNN speaking of the second seal being opened, for me, I hear it as them discussing World War III. Or instead of the third seal being opened, I hear it as economic collapse or dollar collapse and worldwide famine. And the fourth seal is just a consequence of all these events that sound secular, but they are very much biblical. You see, I don't live in their fake reality, and I pray you don't either. It's important to understand that as Yah is fulfilling his word and his prophecy, the devil has his own spin and his own delusions that he is feeding the world in order to keep everyone in rebellion. You see, if the devil allowed everyone to recognize just how much this world is truly falling in line with Bible prophecy, it would be very hard to keep people tied to him. So every move that Yahuah makes and all that he will do, Satan has his own mainstream lie to keep people tied to his satanic agenda and the direction that he is steering everyone. And so that is the biblical reality that I live in. And the more these narratives keep forming, the closer I know we are to all of this coming to be. I believe that these devil worshippers in charge are waiting for these seals to be opened so they have the authority to act. And so they have been building up these narratives in order that when their authority has been given, they can act. And the world is already built up to believe their stories. So with all of that said, if you understood all that I just said in regards to living in a biblical reality, I'm going to go over what is being said in the mainstream with their narratives so that it can hopefully convict you to stay ready and prepared. So let's start with the war in Israel. Now, I have made a video covering how I view what is going on over there. It is on my website now and also on my channel on Rumble. But let's review what is going on over there currently. And it's possible that by the time this video is made, more has happened. But I'm sure you're aware that since this war started, the news has been steadily keeping it in our minds that Israel is preparing for a ground invasion.
Israeli forces are massing in the south right now near the Gaza border, a buildup that signals an impending ground offensive may not be far off. Richard Engel is there tonight.
Israeli troops were caught off guard by Hamas's surprise terror attack. Now they're taking the initiative. Israeli forces are streaming south and digging in to target the Hamas-run Gaza Strip with artillery, tanks, and soldiers. The ground offensive could start at any time.
This ground invasion seems to be a big deal in regards to their narrative for multiple reasons, and we will go over it. But we should all know that the ground invasion has already started since last week, and it's well underway.
We're following breaking news. 2 U.S. officials say the Israeli military's ground expansion into Gaza appears to be a rolling start to its invasion. A spokesperson for the IDF says aerial attacks have been targeting Hamas tunnels and other militant-controlled locations. Israel has already amassed hundreds of thousands of troops along the border with Gaza.
Good day. We are coming on the air with breaking news out of the Middle East, where it is now just before 9 at night. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just announced a new phase of his nation's war against Hamas militants who control Gaza. It comes after Israel launched its most intense airstrikes yet on Gaza overnight, the whole territory without cell phone or internet, so the extent of the damage is not yet clear. Just moments ago, the prime minister said Israel is expanding its ground operations inside Gaza.
So yes, it started last weekend, and we can only see what they want us to see. I don't know if you picked up on it or not, but notice that they have a kill switch for all cell phones and the internet.
The whole territory without cell phone or internet, so the extent of the damage is not yet clear.
Please take that into consideration as you prepare. Do not rely on our current technologies to be there. They can cut all of that off so that people can only see what they want us to see. We have no idea what truly is happening over there. But yes, the ground invasion has started. And this ground invasion is deeper than just Israel expanding its operation. It seems like they plan to use it as a scapegoat as for the reason why they will be escalating into World War III. They are planning to bring Iran into this war. And this whole agenda seems to be the storyline of how Israel and Iran and the US go to war. Now, I explained in my video about this Israel war, how I looked at what's going on over there as just playing out Albert Pike's plan for the 3 world wars. If you haven't watched it, please do so. How I see it, all this escalation is just them bringing out the conflict between Israel and the Muslim world. They use a different word, but that word brings up red flags. So for all of us, it's important to understand the different sides to this conflict. There is the West, which consists of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the rest of Europe. And there is the East, which consists of Russia, China, and Iran, amongst other countries like North Korea. Japan would be a part of the West as well, and South Korea. I'm right now sticking to the Middle East conflict though. Recently, United States Senator Mitch McConnell, he labeled China, Russia, and Iran as the new axis of evil.
I mean, what we have now is an axis of evil: China, Russia, and Iran. Iran taking care of funding all of these terrorists, being backed up by these two big countries, and you saw that President Xi said that he and the Chinese and the Russians are going to be friends forever. So this is a big crisis that needs to be confronted by the most important democracy in the world.
He very clearly was drawing the lines between the conflict. So where I want to start in this conflict, we should understand what the United States has done since this war has begun.
The Pentagon today announced the U.S. is sending military assets closer to Israel, including one of the Navy's most advanced aircraft carriers. Courtney, what do we know?
Yeah, that's right, Kate. The Pentagon announcing the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group is heading to the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, that includes the Navy's newest aircraft carrier, the Ford, and cruisers and 4 guided missile destroyers. Now, these ships can launch missiles that can hit both targets on the land and be used for air defense. This is a show of support, but also a show of power. The U.S. goal is to deter Hamas and anyone supporting Hamas from further attacks. The U.S. is also adding additional air power on land near Israel, including F-35s, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the U.S. arsenal.
So, Courtney, does this mean the U.S. military could get pulled into the war?
Well, the U.S. officials I'm speaking with insist that at this point there is no active consideration for sending U.S. boots on the ground.
What's the Pentagon's plan here?
Well, Stuart, the Pentagon is boosting the U.S. presence, and it's doing so quickly. You've got aircraft carriers, warplanes, munitions, and now you've got a couple of thousand troops who are on standby to potentially be ready to leave in 24 hours' notice. This went out from the Pentagon this morning. The Deputy Press Secretary saying, quote, Secretary Austin placed approximately 2,000 personnel and a range of units on a heightened state of readiness through a prepare to deploy order, which increases DoD's ability to respond quickly to the evolving security environment in the Middle East. No decisions have been made to deploy any forces at this time. CENTCOM's former commander says they could help equip Israeli forces.
With its closest Mideast ally at war, tonight the U.S. military is surging resources to Israel's backyard, moving an aircraft carrier and attack ships to the Persian Gulf, deploying advanced missile defense systems to the region, and putting more U.S. troops on standby who could deploy on short notice. The goal, containing the Israel-Gaza conflict before it spirals into a regional war that could suck in the U.S.
If any group or any country is looking to widen this conflict and take advantage of this very unfortunate situation that we see, our advice is don't.
Defense Department officials tell NBC News these latest moves are intended to deter Iran from threatening Israel or U.S. troops in the region. Iran, a major backer of both Hamas and Lebanon-based Hezbollah, another of Israel's arch enemies.
We are concerned. We expect that there's a likelihood of escalation.
Tonight, there are growing signs the crisis may already be spreading. The U.S. ordering its non-emergency staff in Iraq to leave after recent drone attacks targeted U.S. forces in both Iraq and Syria. And on Thursday, a U.S. warship in the Red Sea shot down cruise missiles and drones launched by Iran-backed Houthi forces in Yemen. The Pentagon says their target may have been Israel.
How high is the risk right now of a regional war?
Well, I think the primary focus is to prevent widening of the war. It's right on the cusp of a disaster. Passions are high.
I can confirm that since our initial force posture announcement, approximately 900 troops have subsequently deployed or are in the process of deploying to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. These include forces that have been on prepare to deploy orders and which are deploying from the continental United States.
So if you see all that, you should understand that this was just over a period of 1 month. The United States has sent out troops in the Middle East and they are ready for war. And the conflict is escalating outside of what is just going on with Israel.
Overnight, a dramatic retaliation. The U.S. striking 2 facilities in eastern Syria that the Pentagon says were used by groups linked to Iran. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin calling them self-defense strikes that were a response to a series of recent drone attacks against U.S. forces. The Pentagon says there have been at least 19 attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria in the last 9 days. 21 personnel have been injured. These strikes meant to deter Iran, which the U.S. says backs the groups launching the attacks. Austin saying, quote, Iran wants to deny its role in these attacks against our forces. We will not let them.
We know that these are Iranian-backed militia groups that are supported by Iran, and of course we hold Iran responsible for these groups.
Amid rising tensions in the region, the Biden administration is walking a fine line, hitting Iranian-backed groups suspected of targeting the U.S. in an effort to deter future aggression, but not wanting to provoke a wider war.
And so if you're not aware of how much the narrative has been escalating over the month of October, this should give you a clear picture of where this is going. But the problem is that our news is very much one-sided. For those of us who live in the West, or who are receiving news coverage from the Western media, the narrative from the media is very one-sided. So I assume that most people don't know the rhetoric from the other side. So you just saw what the United States did to Syria, but understand what happened 2 days before.
President Biden warning Iran not to attack American troops in the Middle East as Israel readies for a ground invasion.
Israel has the right, and I would add a responsibility, to respond to the slaughter of their people. And we will ensure Israel has what it needs to defend itself against these terrorists. That's a guarantee. My warning to the Ayatollah was that if they continue to move against those troops, we will respond. And he should be prepared. It has nothing to do with Israel.
You see, Biden gives this warning, and then the next day, the Iranian foreign minister warned the United States at the United Nations.
Mr. President, the history of Iranian civilization shows that we have always supported peace and security. But today in New York and the United Nations, I say frankly to the American statesmen who are now managing the genocide in Palestine that we do not welcome to expansion of the war in the region. But I warn, if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared from this fire. It is our home, and West Asia is our region. We do not compromise with any party and any side. And we have no reservation when it comes to our home's security. The genocide in Gaza must stop immediately. The forced displacement of the people of Gaza must be stopped immediately.
And it was after this warning that the United States then attacked Syria, saying it had nothing to do with this war in Israel.
Secretary Lloyd Austin calling them self-defense strikes that were a response to a series of recent drone attacks against U.S. forces.
You see, war is brewing in the Middle East. And the thing is that most of the people that we know personally, our family and our friends, they're not prepared for it in the least. So with this current ground invasion, it looks like war with Iran is looking to be very likely. A day after the United States attack in Syria, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi took to Twitter, now called X, and said, Zionist regime's crimes have crossed the red lines, which may force everyone to take action. Washington asked us not to do anything, but they keep giving widespread support to Israel. The U.S. sent messages to the axis of resistance, but received a clear response on the battlefield. Again, going back to Albert Pike, if you remember what I said in the video I made about his plan for 3 world wars, what the Iranian president has declared is exactly aligned with this plan. He has said that Israel has crossed red lines. What is a red line? The Cambridge Dictionary defines it as a limit beyond which someone's behavior is no longer acceptable. And so the risk of war escalating seems to be very high. You need to be aware of it. War is continuing to escalate. The United Nations has been calling for a ceasefire.
To ease epic suffering, make the delivery of aid easier and safer, and facilitate the release of hostages, I reiterate my appeal for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
But Netanyahu said there will be no ceasefire.
Or surrender to tyranny and terror. Now rest assured, Israel will fight. Since October 7th, Israel has been at war. Israel did not start this war. Israel did not want this war. But Israel will win this war.
Meanwhile, Israeli ground operations inside Gaza have entered their fourth day. You can see here Gaza under a shroud of haze after a weekend of heavy bombardments as civilians there lack basic necessities like food, water, and medicine. In a news conference today, an IDF spokesperson said their ground operations inside Gaza will continue and will intensify. Now, as military operations ramp up, so too are calls for a humanitarian pause, with the death toll in Gaza worsening. But while speaking with reporters this afternoon, Netanyahu was defiant.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism.
He is telling us all that they will continue on with this war. It's very clear. War is on the tongue of many nations, which is why I feel that peace is being taken from the earth. Like the president of Turkey, Erdogan, threatens to declare war on Israel and send his military to Gaza in a chilling warning.
İsrail, sen buralara nasıl geldin? Nasıl girdin? Sen bir işgalcisin. Sen bir örgütsün. Dolayısıyla Türk milleti bunu biliyor. İsrail, biz de seni savaş suçlusu olarak dünyaya ilan edeceğiz. Gazze'de savunma değil, açık ve alçak bir katliam yürütülmektedir. Gazze halkının sergilediği vakur, kararlı ve inançlı duruş, tarihe şanlı bir direniş destanı olarak yazılacaktır.
Then we saw on Tuesday that Yemen's Houthis are entering the war on Israel, and they vow to ramp up attacks as the conflict spirals.
Yemen's Houthi movement says it's fired a wave of missiles and drones against Israel, now officially entering the war between Israel and Islamist militants in Gaza, and cementing fears by world powers of the conflict spilling into more countries.
We're even seeing China sending troops to the Middle East. China
has entered the growing tensions in the Middle East, deploying a significant naval presence as a deterrent against American forces. However, officials in the security system and experts in the civilian sector are unanimous that China will not intervene in any case. The Chinese Ministry of Defense made an official announcement on Sunday, revealing that they are dispatching 6 warships to patrol the Middle East. This decision is seen as a direct response to the United States' significant military buildup near Israel. Currently, Chinese warships are actively patrolling the Persian Gulf, and just last week they engaged in a joint military exercise with Omani armed forces.
This is not just about Israel and the Middle East. This is the baseline scapegoat for World War III. And if you don't have this proper understanding, you will not be ready for things as they escalate. Right now, China and Russia are calling the United States the agent for global instability. According to TASS, a Russian news agency, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, I may have said that wrong, he said, the Western policy of steady escalation of the conflict with Russia carries the threat of a direct military clash between nuclear powers, which is fraught with catastrophic consequences. Shoigu made these remarks at the Beijing Yishan Forum, China's annual international military summit, where the country's second highest ranked military official, Zhang Shuxia, also issued oblique criticisms of the United States. And with all this rhetoric happening, what does the United States report at the same time?
The Pentagon asking Congress to fund a nuclear bomb 24 times more powerful than those dropped on Japan to end World War II. This would be major to have in our arsenal. This is the Senate Armed Services Committee raises concerns about growing nuclear threats from Russia, North Korea. Tom Dempsey has more on this from Washington. Tom?
Good morning, Marky. Yeah, this morning, military leaders in the United States want to see Congress approve the production of a brand new nuclear weapon far more powerful than the atom bombs used in World War II. The military leaders saying they want to keep Americans protected from rising threats around the world. As the world watches wars being fought in both Europe and the Middle East, this morning a new push by the Department of Defense to upgrade its nuclear weapons. Military leaders recently announcing they will pursue production of the B-6113 nuclear gravity bomb, a weapon 24 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan during World War II. One defense leader writing in a statement that the need for the new nuclear weapon, quote, is reflective of a changing security environment and growing threats from potential adversaries.
This is as serious a topic as we will hear about this year.
Vladimir Putin on Monday spoke at the Russian Security Council meeting about the United States. This is what he said.
They do not like it when someone tells or acts not in accordance with their wishes. They only believe in their own exceptionalism. They believe that they can do anything. They do not want durable peace at the Holy Land. They need chaos in the Middle East. That's why they are discrediting those countries that insist on the immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, insisting on stopping the bloodshed, and are willing to make a practical contribution in the resolving this crisis, not trying to gain from this. Even the UN, the clearly stipulated position of the global community, is attacked and bullied and being discredited. I would like to emphasize this. In our approaches to the situation in the Middle East, unlike the Western stance, we have never had any wish to gain anything from that. We have always clearly stipulated our position, declared our position, and it hasn't changed across the years. We stand for the establishment of the full-fledged Palestinian state.
And it's now being reported that Vladimir Putin turns on Netanyahu as he sees Israel as Russia's enemy. The article from the Daily Express says Vladimir Putin will now see Israel as an enemy as he moves closer to Iran and sides with Hamas in the Middle East. A former speechwriter for the Russian president tells Daily Express US. Now, it's important. Let me just say this. Do not mistake anything about Israel and Russia as being the Gog and Magog war. Please do not follow that false narrative that has nothing to do with it. I spoke about that in What Happens at the End of the Bible Part 4 series if you want to know more about that topic. What you need to understand is that war is upon us, and it looks like it will start in the Middle East first. Change is upon this world, and peace will be taken from the earth, and all these conflicts will continue to build and they will escalate. We are approaching what we know as World War III. And you can know this with a surety because, first off, they're all talking about it. But as I played for Mitch McConnell earlier,
what we have now is an axis of evil: China, Russia, and Iran. Iran taking care of funding all of these terrorists, being backed up by these two big countries, and you saw that President Xi said that he and the Chinese and the Russians are going to be friends forever. So this is a big crisis that needs to be confronted by the most important democracy in the world.
He labeled China, Russia, and Iran the new axis of evil. And do you know when that term was used earlier? It was used earlier during World War II when describing Germany, Italy, and Japan. They are telling us without being clear that we are approaching World War III. And listen, they don't want it to be clear because whatever their agenda is, they want to catch everyone off guard. But you must live in full reality. The United States is supporting war in Europe against Ukraine, and now supporting war in the Middle East with Israel, and soon to be against Iran, while China is dealing with an economic collapse and still emphasizing their desire to claim Taiwan, which the United States has said that they will be against as well. These are many different fronts of war and many countries that are involved in it, that World War III. And so by now, I'm sure that you can see that the world is completely on edge and moving towards war. For me, the first thing that I expect to really affect our Western world is not war. for oil prices. If you see war escalate in the Middle East, expect to see the price of oil skyrocket. The World Bank has warned just this Monday that a small disruption could cause the price of oil to jump to $102 a barrel. But they also said oil prices could soar to a record high of more than $150 a barrel if the war between Israel and Hamas leads to a repeat of the full-scale conflict in the Middle East witnessed 50 years ago. That's a real problem if oil reaches that level. Think about gas prices and where they're going to go. High gas prices, high diesel prices makes everything a problem. This is why you should be preparing for it now and not when it actually happens. That is a major problem that's right at our doorstep. And do not forget that the government shutdown is still right around the corner with the date at November 17th, but that whole agenda, it doesn't look likely with this new agenda surrounding this new Speaker of the House. What's also very major is that they're now warning us that terror threats in the United States are high.
Now to those growing terror threats on the U.S. homeland. FBI Director Christopher Wray was on Capitol Hill today, warning that the risk of a terrorist attack on the U.S. has risen, quote, to a whole other level, not seen since the emergence of ISIS.
A sober warning from the director of the FBI that the war between Israel and Hamas could lead to attacks in the U.S.
Our most immediate concern is that violent extremists, individuals or small groups, will draw inspiration from the events in the Middle East to carry out attacks against Americans going about their daily lives.
Director Christopher Wray said domestic terrorists could target Jewish or Muslim communities, and he specifically mentioned the arrest of a man in Houston earlier this month,
who'd been studying how to build bombs and posted online about his support for killing Jews.
He was referring to Sohaib Abuyash.
That right there sounds like pure propaganda, but we truly don't know what they're going to do. But this is what we do know. If you are living your life oblivious to all of this and have not spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared yourself for things to change, you need to do so now. We are at the time of change, and though none of us can put a timetable on it because we obviously do not know when Yah will allow all this to occur, we should be able to clearly see the signs and make sure we are ready for it. There are a multitude of events that could happen that could tip us right into this great reset. You need to be aware and ready for it. What I'm trying to communicate is that the narrative for the conflict on the earth is set. And whenever the second seal is opened, if it hasn't been opened already, the narrative for it is ready to be believed. This war in Israel is a complete narrative leading everyone into a new world order. And if you're following it and attaching to it, you are being led down their path. Detach from their agendas and prepare yourself for Yah's kingdom. This is not a time to be distracted by what they're telling you. This is a time to be ready and live in trust of the Most High. That is the most important thing. I do not provide this information to promote fear. I am not fear-mongering as people like to accuse. There are certain realities directly in our face that we must deal with and be prepared for. There is a reason that our Father has allowed us to be awake to all these plots and these schemes. He has given us a sound mind to see through their narratives. The rest of the world is asleep, and everything will come upon them suddenly, and they will not be prepared. When this happens, this is what leads people to be moved in fear and do things they normally wouldn't do, which is exactly what we saw during the times of COVID. During that time, those of us who have been spiritually and mentally prepared for what this world was bringing, we were not led into their schemes and their traps. Continue to get your houses in order and prepare however Father is leading you. There are hard times ahead, and you must stay in reality and not look at the world through the same blindness that everyone else is seeing the world through. But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Yahuah so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. I made this video so that none of you are asleep. I do not want any of these things to come upon you unexpectedly, which makes you be led into irrational decisions. When these problems arise, because you expect them, you will also know that your only source and solution is Yahusha. You will know that Though everyone is talking secular, this is all about something spiritual. And you will not allow yourself to be steered into their schemes and their plots as they try to narrate the judgments of Yah. Yah's wrath is not for us, that is called to him and are covered by him. The world is heading to first conflict and then economic depravity where no one's money will be able to save them. So with all this evidence, it must be recognized that you cannot store your treasures up with the rest of the heathens. As Yahusha said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." That's Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. Do not be scared about what is coming to this world. Just live in continuous fear, respect, and honor of our Creator, and make Him your priority. Do not live asleep, but live awake to reality. Do not prepare for a world that does not exist. You cannot make all these plans for the future without understanding how we will move out of these international conflicts and monetary issues that are directly ahead of us. Have an answer for that first. How do you see the conflict with Russia and Europe, Iran and Israel, China and the United States playing out? Do you expect that all these conflicts to just disappear with no consequence to the world? Live in reality and beware of the wars being waged against you because they're mental, not physical. These mental wars are leaving you unprepared for the real war that is coming. Be ready for it. Be strong and live your life through the covering of the Most High. He wants to fight for you and protect you if you are His. So stay connected to Him and place your life in His hands and trust Him. Remember, many sorrows shall be to the wicked, but he who trusts in Yahuah, mercy shall surround him. That's Psalms chapter 32, verse 10. Mercy shall surround you who trust in Yah. So stay out of their fake world and live in His reality and trust only in Him, and He will see you through. So hopefully your eyes are now open and you're updated to what is going on in regards to the narratives going on in this world, preparing us for this coming great reset. Please heed this warning. Do not follow them down the path that they're taking everyone else. Stand steadfast in your faith, and all of you, get your houses in order. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share this with others. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel on Facebook, Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I'd like to thank all who donate and contribute to this ministry. Please know that your donations are truly a blessing to this ministry. I thank you for your love and your support and letting our Father use you. You are truly a blessing, and I really appreciate your support, especially during these times. Thank you. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.